Welcome to the Henry Holsters YouTube channel. One of my goals for 2016 is to start producing content for the YouTube channel I have but never use. So I get a lot of questions about how best to use the side channel jig that I designed that DIY Holster sells. So I'm going to walk through folding a shell and then give some tips and recommendations on how best to use it. This is a shell that I just recently folded. I like to use a single spring clamp right at the trigger guard to make sure that that critical spot where the retention is located is lined up precisely from half to half. This is already trimmed and drilled before folding using my trim router jigs. And so I have one of those unfolded here, and we'll fold that in a minute. You have to have some kind of drone to fold around. You can use a real gun, you can use a blue gun, you can use a DIY drone. I don't recommend multi-molds for folding just because typically the area around the side channel is a little bulkier on them, and you can't quite get nice and tight down into the jig. So I like blue guns because you can somewhat permanently mount a sight channel on there and not have to constantly tape or untape a real gun. I also had a lot of blue guns left over from when they were the only way to make holster molds before I got my CNC and all that fun stuff. So I use blue guns for that. You can use whatever works well for you. You'll see on my jig that I have foam in the slots. The reason for that is that the slots were cut a little bit deeper in order to accommodate different heights. Some guys wanted suppressor height sights, some guys didn't. The jig needed to be able to accommodate all of those, so I machined the slots deep, and then I recommend that you put foam in so that when you press your shell in, you not only get contact at the shoulders of the sight channel on both sides of your rod, but you also get contact on the face to prevent you from getting that little bit of flaring out, that toe right at the tip of the muzzle. The different slot widths are designed to accommodate different widths of sight channel rod and also different thicknesses of plastic. If you're doing 2-layer holsters or you're doing holsters out of .125, you'll need to use one of the wider slots to get the whole thing to fit in there without putting marks in the plastic. If you use a slot that's too tight and just jam it in there, you'll usually get some burnish marks in the plastic surface, which doesn't affect the function but doesn't look good. So here's a shell. I'm going to pull it right off. This is one of my router trim molds. That's a whole separate topic that I'll be videoing on later. So here's a shell. It's already been routed to final shape, so this is trimmed and drilled. After this folding step, it'll just get a little bit of finish polishing, and then it'll be ready for hardware. So I'm going to put it on my strip heater. I use an EMX2 strip heater. These are made in Canada. There's a couple of different options. There's a strip heater available on Amazon called an FTM. I know some other holster makers who have it, and it works fine. One of the budget options is a kind of greenish strip heater made by Quincy Labs. I don't recommend that one because its peak temperature isn't high enough to really get the plastic as soft as you want. So I don't use an IR thermometer or a temperature for this step. I just put it on there and feel until it feels supple enough. You can also, if you don't have a strip heater, you can do this stage with a heat gun with one of those wide duckbill attachments on the heat gun. If you're going to do that, apply most of your heat from the glossy, the inside of the plastic, rather than the textured outside, and that'll reduce your risk of glossing the plastic too much. So once it's flexible enough, I'm just going to take it, fold it around my blue gun real quick, apply my spring clamp to align the two halves, and then press it down into my slot on the sight channel jig. Apply a little bit of compressed air to cool it. And that's it, it's done. You can see that I've got a nice straight line down here, and there's no horning, there's no toe sticking out there. And that one's pretty much done. I usually would then take the drone out and blow a little bit of compressed air on the inside. And then that one would get set aside for buffing. So that's how I fold shells using the sight channel jig.